So there are two big areas to focus on whenever you're working up any kind of movement around the drums on tenors. One is how does it sound, and then two is how are you moving while doing this. So with the first one, how does it sound? So we want to make sure that your bead is equidistant from the rim regardless of which hand is playing. So again, if we're on the windshield wiper, we want to make sure that we don't have the right hand in the middle of the drum, so we get a thud. We want it to be equidistant here. And we want to make it so that when we're moving in the most efficient way possible around the drums. So if we're moving in a circle like this, you can make your reality very blurry, just like I did. But you want to make sure that you are moving the smallest amount of motion from it. So we don't want to go like from this edge of the rim to this edge of the rim all the way to here, like doing triangle motions, etc. So really focus on those two things as a starter point for how are you moving and how does it sound when you are moving. You want to also make sure that your hand that's underneath is low in terms of where the wrist is to the drum. So another tendency that a lot of people have when they're playing sweeps is they start to raise up like this. So their shoulders start to raise up, which if you have a carrier on, that's going to make it so your drums also go with it. So it's not going to have any change in the height in your drums from your hands, and makes you tight, which makes your biceps tight, which makes your forearm tight, and then your fingers, etc. So it works its way down. It's going to make it so that your hand is going to hit more when you are doing this because you're raising it up rather than getting it out of the way. Let me show you here. So if our hand is underneath, the higher you raise this, the more likely you're going to hit. But the lower you can keep this while keeping the hand on top, the more space there is for your hands to be able to move up and down. So if you start raising this up, now you're going to be hitting. If you do stick over stick, you're going to get some issues as well. It's just going to raise your heights. And then you're going to get snare players making fun of you because you're going to have tenor heights where everything just looks all the same rather than having distinct like accents and taps, etc. So whenever doing this like drum 3 to drum 4 kind of crossover, you want to make sure that you are not changing the wrist angle while doing this. So you don't want to use what's called like a Julie Spencer technique, which is like great for like a mallet percussion or even multi-percussion, etc., where you actually like rotate your wrist and you play with the backhand to do like a quick sweeping motion. So when you're going from here to here, you're not windshield wipering your way across like this. You're maintaining the same technique that you would use going up and down while moving over like that. You might be using French grip, you might be using American or Germanic grip with your playing, but whatever it is that you're doing, maintain that. Don't all of a sudden switch from French to Germanic, etc. while you are moving around on these drum 3 to drum 4 crossovers. Drummers, we come up with weird names for stuff. Diddle makes sense because you're doing like a pair of notes and then a diddle, which is 2 on one hand. But like chut cheeses, patty fla flas, slam fives, cha-cha-cha. What? There's also a rudiment called a cheesy poof. Drummers, we're weird. Whenever I'm playing crossover sweeps or scrapes, I'm not changing the angle of my wrist. So it's very important to not do this and fall around like that. Okay, so you want to maintain the same angle so you can have the same sounding stroke going up and down whenever you're moving horizontally across. Whenever you're practicing these sweeps, it is important to be able to play it at a variety of dynamics. So practicing all these really lightly on all of them at like fortissimo, etc. So like practice the full range from like 3 inches to 12 inches, etc. Whenever you're working on this, don't just always play everything at 9, because then you're going to get tenor heights and snare players are going to make fun of you for that. Especially if you got, you know, accents, the taps where the accents are here and the taps are here, and it's like, wait, there's not much of a difference there. And you can make all the excuses you want about how you're moving around the drums, but snare players are still going to make fun of you because they're rude. Ask me how I know. I was a snare player. I try to not be rude anymore though. my playing zones are a little bit different here when I'm going down the drums than when I'm doing it with a crossover. Now, the reason why is because depending on the size of your tenor drums, whether they're the smaller set or a larger set, you're gonna need to be able to get the wrist out of the way, or you're gonna be hitting the butt of the stick on your wrist. And so if you move it up just a little bit so that you're further apart, it makes it so that the hands are less likely to hit each other. However, when you're doing that, you need to make sure that you're staying equidistant, so that way that you are not like all of a sudden playing in the dead zone in towards the center of the drum, or like center of the drum here. So we're still staying the same distance from the rim. We're just changing where we're moving so that way we can get our hands out of the way just a little bit more for these crossovers. I'm trying to practice the way that I would play this fast. And so if I get into the habit of at this speed at 40, then when I get up to faster speeds, this is not the kind of technique I want. I don't want a dead stroke where it stops down here. I want the stroke to come back up. So that's why I'm practicing it this way when I'm doing it slow. Highly recommend. Pro tip from a pro gamer. Book Report on 1 is a pretty challenging grid to work on, but fortunately, this play along can go as slow as 20 beats a minute all the way up to 160. All you have to do is use the timestamps in the description, and you can jump to whatever BPM you want. And there are several hundred more grid variations just like this on the link on the screen. And they're all free, so check it out and consider sharing with a friend if you like the content I create. There's a tendency when I first started teaching drum lines to show the students that I was working with every single error that they're making. Like, hey, this accent was a little too loud. This one was a little too soft. This one, you could have changed your technique, blah, blah, blah. And then I just overload them with a fire hose of information, as opposed to just giving them one thing to focus on and saying, hey, for this next rep, just focus on this. And then maybe do that a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4 times. And then cool. Now that we've refined that, and that's hopefully consistent and improved, now let's do one more thing. So figure out if you have a list of things to work on with the drumline, prioritize it with what's the biggest thing that's going to have the biggest return on investment in time, and then focus on that. Now, if you're working with the drumline with multiple people in it that all have different things to work on, then you could be like, hey, I want you to work on this thing, and I want you to focus on this other thing. Or you could ask, hey, of your list of priorities as a performer, what could you work on that would improve your own playing? And then that way it puts the ownership on the students, and so that way they also learn how to teach themselves when you are not there working with them. Sloppy. But it was fun. If you want to find that play along as well as 1,500 more hours of content, just go to jaredoleary.com/drum. Over 600 grid variations, a bunch of chop stuff, a bunch of technique, and over 100 bass drum exercises that are play alongs. Timestamps in all the descriptions and all that fun stuff.